license. We're going to start out with talking about our rules around lead, just to wrap those up. And then we will be looking at our strategic plan that we've been working on for 14 months now. And earlier this morning, we told the governor we anticipate having an adopted strategic plan to hand to her by the end of today. So the expectations are out there. And Pooja will be joining us to talk about the governor's budget towards the end of our meeting. So very full but exciting time for us. Alyssa, will you call the roll, please?
All right, Sue Miller.
Here.
Pat Allen, do we have you on the phone yet? Okay. Martha Brooks.
Present.
Donalda Dodson.
Present. Colt
Gill is excused. Holly Marr.
Present.
Firebor's Poxaresh is excused. Eva Ripito.
I'm here.
Shauna Rodriguez.
I'm here, but I can't follow that.
Donna Schnittker.
Here.
Terry Tallhofer.
Here.
And Kali Thorne-Ladd, do we have you on the phone yet? Okay. Bobby Weber.
Here.
Miriam Calderon.
Here.
And then do we have Kate Wilcox?
I'm here.
Great. Kim Fredland.
Here.
Great. And then no Candace Pelt. Great.
She's on her way.
She's on her way. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. The first thing on our agenda is public testimony. So nobody has signed up, but I'm wondering if there's anyone here who would like to speak to the council. All right. Nobody is coming forward, so we will move on then to our childcare rules implementation and adoption, and invite Dawn Taylor, our childcare director, to join us.
And Sarah is going to present.
And Sarah. Right. This is behind tab 1, council members, as you have probably seen in our packets that staff has put together for us. So, not a new topic. We've discussed this before, and it'll be great to get an update on the status of the lead testing and move forward from there. So welcome, Dawn and Sarah.
Are you okay with me advancing?
Yes, please.
And you can do that now. Perfect.
All right, so the majority of this presentation will be Dawn, but we wanted to start off by just giving you an update on how lead testing in licensed facilities has been going. So of the 3,832 active facilities, 3,375 of those have completed testing with all fixtures passing. An additional 40 facilities have also completed their lead testing and had at least one of the fixtures in their homes fail. And of those 42 were relatively recent, because as we'll talk about a little bit next, the labs have been backed up. So we've been receiving ongoing results. So those two do not have approved mitigation plans, but the great thing is 38 of those 40 do have approved mitigation plans. They've received visits from licensing specialists to verify that those mitigation plans are in place and working. So that includes things like lead filters or using bottled water or an alternative water source, I think is the term of art, or not using the fixture, because in some cases it's not an impediment for them just not to use the sink that tested above 15 parts per billion. So then the other numbers, we know 117 facilities have submitted a test to a lab and are still awaiting those results to come back. I think just to give you a sense of, whether that's a backup or not, the results we're receiving as of last week were submitted in August by programs. The samples were submitted in August, so there does seem to be some significant backup that we've been testing. So I think that accounts for that number. And then there are 300 who, as of when our licensing specialist made the call, had not begun testing. So I say that to say, now they've been, receiving technical assistance ongoing, and since that call, they were identified in that group. Many of those have submitted a test, but we don't have those updated numbers for you today, but should soon. So I think overall, you see the majority of providers have completed their testing, so I think.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Bobby.
So you were thinking of looking at the people who hadn't tested by type of care and maybe language. Were you able to look at that and see if we can find out
Yeah.
who's struggling?
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty even split among type of facilities. So 60 to 65 are in family child care, and the other 40 are centers. So there doesn't seem to be a huge difference there, but Don's team did pull an analysis of language, and there do seem to be, I think the number you used, like, for example, half of, there's only 48 providers or so that speak Vietnamese as a first language, but of those, half of the providers had not tested. So at that point, to sort of a need there. And a lot of CCR&Rs have really stepped it up to help providers here, and that's been really great. That's accounted for a large number of folks, and we're looking into that, and Don will talk more about that next. Any other questions on the data? Yep.
Do we have any sense of how much of a issue this was perceived to be by providers? Was it relatively, just kind of business as usual to do it? Or were there specific issues that between the licensing specialists and the R&Rs, we found out this was hard, this was hard, this was hard? Or just what did we learn? Are we ready to say?
I mean, I would say in looking at the data and talking with licensing specialists and, add in here, of course, that, many people just didn't realize to turn it in. Some of it, there's a backlog. So we didn't receive a lot of information that there were barriers. It was more, didn't turn it in, there's a backlog, I've called, waiting for my test kit. So it was really more around that, not so much barriers, but I do think that we're, to the, different languages, we do want to make sure, and part of our continuing to bring programs into compliance will be to provide that intensive technical assistance if there is a language barrier, that we can help them get it done.
And I would just add to that, Dawn, that pretty much, since the council took action on the rule, licensing specialists have been talking to providers about it, so that sort of more general technical assistance, this requirement is coming, and giving information has been an ongoing part of what, the conversations that licensors have been having, and all of their sort of touch points and connections with providers since the council passed the rules. I think that helped.
Eva?
Yeah, I was just going to back up what you said about not turning it in. The only feedback I got, excuse me, that I remember getting was that a lot of people didn't realize that they had to turn in the results, that they didn't just keep it with their paperwork like they do other things. And so once they learned that, it was not a big deal, but it was just like a miscommunication somehow.
And I think, and that's really where, we're going to continue to provide the ongoing technical assistance. Know that it might need to be a little more targeted and intensive if there's some linguistic barriers. We've, a lot of our regional partners, CCR&Rs, have really stepped up to support non-English speaking providers. And so we feel, confident that we're going to be able to really provide the support that they need. We're also identifying other resources that can support both the costs associated with testing and mitigation to providers. We're working with our colleagues at Department of Education to explore applying for a Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. And so there's a grant out of the EPA that might be available to us. And that we are prepared to, as we begin continuing to bring people into compliance, we're focused on the technical assistance to providers. Because this is a new requirement, we'll continue to add in and implement progressive enforcement as appropriate.
All right, Martha?
And Dawn, I know you said this, but of the ones that failed, those were primarily faucets, right? Not big system type.
Right, yeah, there were, at least looking through the data, there wasn't a case where someone had, all of their home was sort of
Yeah.
testing above. It's really one fixture, two fixtures.
And so the rules that you have in front of you, really, the rule revision does not contain policy or any practice changes. It really consolidates it into one section across all different rule sets. And we were able to update the reference because there's a new 3T guidance as of October 2018 that is put in there, and then it clarifies the timing and the applicability of the rule. So again, no change in policy or practice. It's really just to consolidate and clarify.
Looking through the document, red is everything that was deleted, so it was throughout multiple sections in rule, and then the blue is that new section, really consolidating. Anything highlighted, we noticed this morning, there were some references to incorrect rules since we've moved things around, so that's just highlighting a change we've made since we sent this to you earlier this week, and that'll be posted online, but, sorry?
All red.
It's all red.
That's okay.
Okay.
There's strikeouts and then there's non-strikeouts.
There's no blue section for you?
It is
It's called testing and drinking water is the section, sorry. about that.
So
I can,
Melissa, can you clarify?
Yes.
What that conversation was?
yeah. So, and actually, I've got some in the recycle bin that I can go that have the right colors for you. So the first one for registered family starts on page 8. And so you'll see it's in black and red, but that whole section, 205-0105, testing for lead in drinking water, that's all the new language that's being proposed. And so what it's done is instead of it being sprinkled throughout and in multiple sections, there's just one testing for drinking water section in the rule. And so it's broken up by the purpose, initial testing, ongoing, sampling, results. It goes from page 7 to page 10. And then it's the same language for certified family and certified center. And again, it's really taking what was sprinkled throughout and just having one location in each of these rule sets.
Okay.
Does that make
So-
sense?
Yes, yeah, and if you take time to look at all the red lines versus the new language, you can certainly see that it's not changing the policies, it's just reorganizing them.
Yes. Yeah.
Hopefully, so they will be easier to follow and clearer for providers and for users.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else you want to say, Dawn or Sarah?
No?
Any big overview of what the new 3Ts look like? Or are they dramatically different, or have you had a chance to?
No, Alyssa has done the comparison. They're not dramatically different at all. I think the biggest difference, they are prettier and more user-friendly. It's sort of more of a toolkit than a document, so.
It's shortened. I believe the 2006 version was 104 pages. This one's 80. And it's more visually approachable. It's broken down into modules and toolkits so that it's intended to be used and not just read. It's less technical language, so it's more easily understood. So it'll definitely serve as a more useful resource, hopefully, to both the field and to licensors than the previous version did.
And does it come in multiple languages, Alyssa?
I will check. On their main website, they just have it in English, but I can see if they have it in other languages, just maybe less obviously. Yeah, that's no problem.
It'd be nice to encourage the feds to do that if they haven't already figured that out. This is a multi-language country we live in. Any other questions from council members of Dawn or Sarah on sort of how it's gone to date with the testing and then what these rules are representing? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt temporary rules clarifying existing rules on lead testing submission and remediation for all licensed childcare settings.
Chair Miller, do you want those for inclusive of all three, or do you want to do them separately?
Let's do them together since they're basically the same.
So, Chair Miller, I move that we adopt the temporary rules for registered family childcare, certified family childcare, and certified centered childcare.
Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not those in favor.
This is
please-
Pat. I just wanted to let you know I'm finally here.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat, for being online. Pat is the director of the Oregon Health Authority, for those who might be listening in. So Pat, we have a motion on the floor to adopt these lead testing implementation temporary rules. Any other questions? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye.
I know that's a delayed affirmation. Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, the rules pass. Thank you for your work on that. Bobby?
I just want to be sure I'm understanding the process. These will come back to us because we're adopting them as temporary, which means they are in place now as soon as we adopt them, but they'll come back to us for being made permanent.
Yeah, so we have
Thank you.
6 months.
I just,
to bring them
you'd
back.
think, you'd think I'd get it. It's
It's
like,
not logical, Bobby.
yeah, it's
Why?
like, they keep coming back, and it's like,
I have a feeling you're not the only one who feels that way, Bobby.
Have a life of their own.
So
Thank
in
you.
6 months, Alyssa, so we'll see them in June.
Yeah, if not sooner. With the larger rule revision happening, we'll probably bring them forward, but they'll take effect at a different date than the rest of them. So that, since these temporary rules will expire in 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
They'll be
sure
back.
look forward to that. Thank you. Let's move on to the Early Learning Strategic Plan. And it should be Early Learning System Strategic Plan, because we've all been very focused on how this is a system. And Miriam, I'd love to turn it over to you to make some introductory comments, and congratulations to you and your staff.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for, this has been, I think, quite a journey. And I want to just, share with all of the council members that how appreciative we are of the work that you've done over the past year and really being able to put this plan together. As you all know, the governor convened a children's cabinet, and the children's cabinet work that it went sort of parallel process with the work to do an extensive amount of stakeholder engagement and hear from many different partners across our state around priorities and opportunities to further build our system. Really, the Children's Cabinet benefited greatly, I think, from all of that work and all of the engagement that we've been doing. And you can really see that, I think, reflected in the priorities that are outlined and called for in the governor's recommended budget. So both the Children's Cabinet and then this budget is a significant down payment, I think, and great launching point for us to be able to move many of the strategies and the agendas that we've put forward and really elevated from what we've heard. And so I think it is going to be an incredibly exciting year. David Mendel was so excited about the alignment between the governor's budget and the strategic plan that he already started. He went to do the visual. Here's
I love this.
yeah, an analysis, just a quick and sort of dirty back of the envelope. Where do we see alignment with the governor's recommended budget and the strategies in our strategic plan? And those are represented in yellow. And so you can start to see he's only gotten through 2 of the system goals. So that's I think, pretty powerful, and I think as a council, you should all feel really good about how you've contributed and made an impact in terms of the budget and the children's cabinet. We will be doing a deeper dive and a deeper analysis of this, and I think that's going to be a really important part of the work that we now do, and pivoting from developing a plan to moving towards implementing a plan is really being able to talk about all of that alignment, and really doing important work in this next session to be able to make a lot of what's in this plan a reality. But today, we get to focus in on what we, getting to where we are, and what's the document that you had the ability to look at before this meeting, and hopefully taking action and officially adopting this plan. And so Alyssa has prepared some slides and is going to walk us through what's been happening, I think, since the last time we met, and then what's going to happen sort of post today to actually get us to the final product that we know we'll be using. I also want to mention that Sue and I had an opportunity to present the plan, was it Monday this week, to the Children's Cabinet
long week.
as well. And the other agency leaders and the governor's policy advisors were just absolutely thrilled with the plan and this work. So again, thank you for that. We will be sort of through that conversation. I think we just really focused, I think, on a lot of the details of the plan, the alignment with the governor's agenda through the Children's Cabinet, and started, which we know is a conversation that needs to continue, is what are the parts of this plan that will, as we move to implementation, that will leverage the Children's Cabinet for, how will we leverage the council, how will we leverage sort of other independent state agency action. So that is work as the Children's Cabinet thinks about its work plan for the next year. We'll be looking to sort of where do we embed kind of some of these strategies where we know we'll need the Children's Cabinet, maybe because of the complexity of the strategy, the fact that it's cross-sector, that it is really resource dependent or dependent on new investment, might be some of the criteria that we think about where we use and we leverage the cabinet to be able to drive the work. There's also probably more interest in, Sue, please share your thoughts from Children's Cabinet, but I think there's a lot of already immediate interest in, like, how do we disseminate this? How do we use this? How do we sort of talk about this plan? So I think that's another area where, we'll be doing, once we have sort of the final product, is really how do we use it? How do we help people understand the tremendous vision that we've put together for our system. And really, it's going to, as I know you've all been through strategic planning processes before, you can write a great plan, but it really comes down to, how do you use it? How do you reference it? And make it relevant, and use it really as that guidepost for the work that you want to do. So I think that's some of what's, looking at the outlook and for this next year, sort of more detail around dissemination. I think more, we've got to do the work to think about what are the priorities, right? Where are we going to start to implement, and how we're going to leverage the existing structures that we have at the state level to do this work, and then also think about what does this mean for our partners regionally across the whole system, right? So those are some of the things that I think we have ahead. We've also, and this, I'll touch on this in director's report, so I won't say much now, but we've also embedded some resources within the preschool development grant opportunity for the council to be able to do some, work planning around some of the strategies here too. So I think that's something else that hopefully we may have to look forward to in the next year as we shift to implementation, but that's,
Thanks.
yeah.
I'd love to add just a few comments about the cabinet meeting. So these meetings are really some of the most dynamic ones that I've gone to, especially when you get state agency directors sitting around a table, and when they know that they and their staff have had direct input into this plan, they have a lot of ownership of this plan. And I think that's just going to be so critical as we move it forward in the implementation stage. In fact, last weekend, Miriam and I got an email, I think it was on Saturday or Sunday, from Fairbourse, the director of DHS, saying, here are other areas where we DHS want to be included because we see ourselves in our current strategies, but we see ourselves as a critical player in getting these strategies done. So that's a whole modification of this that's coming, is to add more of those DHS symbols on some of the strategies. The symbols, many cabinet members commented on the symbols and just thought that was a very creative, great way to show this cross-sector partnership, which I think we all agree with. Miriam pointed out that the only symbol that's missing is the early learning symbol. So one's being created. I don't know. There's an infant toddler symbol, but not like a.
Do you have ideas about what our
ELD,
symbol could be?
yeah.
Let me know.
Okay, so we're going to see an ELD symbol dropped in here every once in a while. What?
Traditional building blocks that are used for preschool or?
Well, and some of the hubs have created graphics
Yeah.
that are really nice. I know the Four Rivers has a really nice graphic. Not that I want you to steal it, but it'd be a place to start.
Could share it.
Could share it, look at it, that sort of thing.
So that will be added into this. And another comment I want to make is, two more comments. There was a lot of conversation about the fact that every state agency has branches virtually all over the state, whether they're their branches or contract, with other organizations across the state. So figuring out how we get this plan shared through those agencies and those networks that already exist, so that the state agency offices and staff buy into it. And of course, we talked about the hubs playing a role in making sure that this does get that statewide coverage and then community interpretation and implementation, because we all know it will vary depending on where we are in the state. Right, Donna? Whether we drive 1 hour or 6 hours to get here. So that was another piece that I thought was exciting. And then finally, as Miriam suggested, actually the conversation at the cabinet meeting started out with cabinet members talking about how are we going to disseminate this? Who's going to put the messaging together so that we can make this something that communities at the community level get excited about and see their own investment in, which of course led us to hubs also. But there was a lot of energy around that among legislators who are on the cabinet, as well as others of us sitting there. So love to have your thoughts about that, obviously, as we move forward. I'll let Alyssa do her presentation, but then I think that's an area where we, the council, could really provide some valuable input.
Would it just be possible for you guys to send us a list of who attends the cabinet meetings? So we know if it's a local legislator or someone we have a connection with?
Excellent.
That would be great.
Yep, thanks, Terry. Bobby?
So one of the challenges since we were created is that we're a council for the system, and we also oversee an agency. And so this ownership thing, it's very exciting to me, and I was thrilled also with the symbols. But it was very exciting to me to hear cabinet members expressing ownership. I still think there's this language issue of, it says the Early Learning Council's strategic plan. And it should, it's Early Learning Council System Strategic Plan or something, but that it's like language that communicates clearly we have work that we do, but it really is owned by everybody. Somehow, since we've been created, I've struggled with this, how do we do what we need to do and not in any way communicate that we think we can do it. I just think it's, I don't know, this isn't the time and place, but I'd like us to do that, to worry about that, to get our language that we could all use then, that communicates clearly that it's everybody in the system, everybody who cares about about young children and their families. It's everybody's plan. Not denying that we have an important role, it's legislatively mandated. So we do, but how do we do, it feels like maybe the very first thing people should hear is this is everybody's. I don't know.
System
Yeah,
plan and
we've
not
been-
ours.
That's what we titled it on the, and so I'm sorry, I threw these slides together, so I apologize, Bobby. It should be the system plan, not the council plan, and that's how we've titled the draft actual plan is the system plan.
And saying
get
it's
at
the
that.
plan at Oregon's.
Yeah.
It's the plan for Oregon's early learning system.
Right.
So I don't know if that helps with
I think anything, you know.
more than, more than the early learning.
But it's just that we all get language that we feel accurately describes and keeps the ownership really broad all the time. Not inadvertently slipping into our plan or the council's work to create a plan. I mean, you know, all it's true, but our is a big R.
Well, I totally agree with you, Bobby. And it was interesting, another part of the conversation at the cabinet meeting was with a couple of the cabinet members saying, you know, we need this to be a plan that every adult in Oregon adopts, and they see their role in taking care of children.
There we go.
It's not even our system plan, it's a family, community embedded plan. And so part of the messaging they're looking for is, how do we convince people that they're the solution, they personally are the solution and need to take responsibility for the children in their communities, their neighborhoods, their geographic area. So definitely exciting piece of the conversation, but when you start figuring out all the messages that can come out of this, it'll be deciding how and what to message. Yeah, good point, Bobby. Alyssa, what would you like to tell us about this system plan?
Sure, yeah, I just was gonna spend a couple minutes kind of talking about how this is different and what we've done since the retreat. And so this has been up for a little bit, but we went through and counted how many times these different icons came out. And again, these icons talk about where there's alignment with existing plans. It's not denoting who's going to be a lead in the work, who's taking ownership of anything. It's just reflecting what's been done in other plans. And to Sue's earlier point, we will be adding additional information on child welfare that we got from DHS and adding our ELD icons as well. But as you'll see, there it truly is cross-sector. There's ownership across the board, and it's that's what those icons are indicating.
So before you leave that slide, and Pat, I'm sorry you're on the phone and not here, but you've seen these numbers, and Pat's the winner. Right, Pat?
I appreciate just being allowed to play.
Well, we decided with Fairbourne sending in more DHS bullets, he was in competition with Pat. But I don't think he'll quite get to what OHA is reflecting.
The other changes we've made are somewhat formatting, but some of the feedback we've gotten from you guys was it was sort of hard to reference objectives and strategies with the way we'd had them previously written. So we've numbered them 1 to 14. So when you get into goals 2 and 3, we don't start over at 1. So we were hoping that would be a clean, easy way to better reference some of these. We did work on shortening the introduction to your other comment about it taking so long just to get to the strategies and objectives. And what we did is we moved some of that information into the 3 system goals. So we rewrote those intros as previously they were objective intros with each objective. So we tried to kind of roll that in together with some of the data to help preempt what these objectives will be responding to in the sort of current state of Oregon. And so that's another kind of formatting shift that we made. You also all gave really, really substantive feedback on glossary terms, updates, what was missing, ensuring this was really cross-sector and using terminology that could work in everyone's areas. So that's been revised and should be reflective of both what terms that are used in the plan and terms that would be useful for our cross-sector partners to utilize this. But if there's anything else that you think is missing or seems off, let me know in the next couple days and we'll change those. So sort of the big formatting changes. Are there any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward.
I thought those were great changes.
Great, good, okay. The next thing we did is, you'll remember we did that whole cross-sector grid with the dots, which was really illuminating, I think, both for you guys and for us in terms of thinking about how to use this grid. So we've taken the discussion that we had with you, including your suggestions of where these dots should maybe be. It's been reviewed by Children's Cabinet, but right now we're in the phase of actually sitting down with each agency director to ensure that they're comfortable with where they maybe have a full dot or a half dot. We've also decided we might move away from dots and half dots to triangles and circles and stars, and trying to kind of have a clearer indication of what being a convener or a lead versus a supporting role looks like, and adding some more clarity there. So that will not be ready in this first printed version that we do of the plan, because we want to make sure it's really reflective of our agency partners' commitment to this work, and that we're not speaking for them and committing them to anything. So that's what we're doing right now to really ensure this is cross-sector support and sort of building off of those icons. So presumably anything that has an icon will also have some sort of corresponding commitment, but we know there's more work than just what's currently in existing plans. So we're working on that right now. And Miriam, do you want to add anything to that? Yeah, so the cabinet spoke a little bit about it, but they did get very excited about dissemination and how to get this in folks' hands, so we're working on revising that. The next thing we wanted to do, speaking of what language we use, is I wanted to do a quick poll, if my mouse will work, of names. And so if you want to just like take one and pass it down, and I'll collect them from you guys. These were 3 names that the writing team pulled together based on looking at the governor's recommended budget, thinking about some of the feedback and comments we've heard from you all during these engagement sessions. Sue had shared a really great quote at the cabinet about changing the odds for kids. And so these were the 3 that we felt were short and concise, kind of conveyed our work. Yeah, Eva.
Is this a ranked choice?
Ranked choice.
Okay.
If there's one you absolutely hate, you can cross it off. But I figured that was the easiest way to try and land on a name that everybody kind of felt comfortable with. And we'll still call it, Oregon's Early Learning System Plan, but we wanted to have something that was catchy and easily remembered, and that felt like it could be owned more, particularly by communities, and didn't feel as like bureaucratic as the state plan for something. So you guys can take a minute, and I'll get those back from you.
Names on this?
If you'd like, it's up to you.
I assume you're still open, and not that I'm the right person to come up with something like this, but I assume you're still open for somebody to,
If you want to put that in as a consideration.
Yeah, if you have an idea you want to throw out, we are working with a designer for some of that work, but we're hoping to try to kind of land the name sooner than later. Do you have one on the tip of your tongue, Martha?
It was based on the state motto.
Oh,
have you got one?
Putting that one back in. We had learning to fly was an option we considered because it relates to the She Flies Their Own Wings state motto of Oregon. So previous feedback was that out of context, it may not resonate with folks, but the governor does refer to it in the motto in her introduction. So if that is one that people feel strongly about, we can add that back.
Well, I'm picking up on, that every parent would own it.
Not just parents.
I think every adult.
Yeah.
Fine, okay, yeah, fine. I mean, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
whether all in for kids is the only one that seems to me the kind of language regular people use. And not that, that's what I was looking for, is, something that everybody could think applied to them, included them, all adults, yeah.
That can add a negative on all kids.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. We're all in, I'm all in. And there's,
Can you think of something that's regular words like that?
probably, if you give me a while, but I don't, to be honest, I don't think we've landed on exactly the right one yet. I mean, these three, bringing up Oregon makes more sense to me than any of them, but I'm not sure we've got that one that just really sparks yet.
Oh,
I really want,
No, not spark, but yeah.
Too many places
No,
already.
I'll agree with you
I
there.
really wanted Raising Oregon, but unfortunately.
I know, I
the
was
Coen
thinking of
brothers.
Raising Arizona.
Yeah. I know. You did, yeah.
That's where
So bringing up is sort of a variation.
So Alyssa, how will this be used? Give me an example, so.
Yeah, so we wanted it to be, I mean, we haven't finessed all the details, but like one way of using this would be like bringing up Oregon's plan for the early,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
basically the colon.
It's before the
part, colon, or Oregon's early learning
System plan.
system plan. And the way you've seen this used, I think, in other states or cities that do a strategic plan is it is a way to, reference. So, for example, Philadelphia had a running start, colon, the city of Philadelphia's early learning strategic plan. And so people talk about it as a running start.
It's sort of kind of actually with the governor's the turning point and agenda for Oregon's future, like that kind of short version, instead of just saying the 2019-21 GRB, you've got something that you can quickly kind of
Yeah.
remember offhand.
It also seems like it's really important that any Oregonian would say, I agree to that. I understand it, it's language I use, and of course, I agree with that. Something and that's why early connection sounds jargony to me. It doesn't sound like, that's not how people talk about kids.
You have a
So do you really think that we can't use Raising Oregon
Raising Oregon.
Oregonians?
or something like that without, is it really out because of the movie?
there may be. Yeah, probably, I think.
You think so?
Their copyright laws.
I don't think so, but.
I don't think
Movie titles actually
copyright so
don't have
much as,
copyright.
What's that? Oh, they don't.
So I think to respond to that, I think that for me, the Raising Oregon's Kids piece, like the problem with that is just this concept that there's a fear, especially in our rural communities, frontier communities, about the government trying to raise our children and trying to indoctrinate them and trying to do that. So for me, that's the biggest, as well as the movie, but that's something to steer clear of. The one thing that comes to me is because of the fact that this is about connecting multiple sectors and bringing everyone together to support kids, that connecting for kids is what, for me, speaks to like that piece that we're trying to bring everyone together so that we're connecting for kids and that's our plan.
I don't think we've got it yet. You're getting too many opinions.
What it's
Connecting
worth,
for
I'm
Kids is a
willing-
lot better than early connections.
What, Pat?
For what it's worth, I'm willing to delegate this decision to the extreme wisdom of staff.
Not so sure that that's a wise move, Pat, because we've tried and we've kicked this around a lot. But we can definitely, keep working, it sounds like. Why don't people just turn in their ballots so we can see kind of how close we were and,
Did someone else have a comment?
No, I was.
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
So we can see what maybe, where this group was around these three and we can continue to play around with it.
If you want to pass them around, or at the end, I can.
Did anybody come up with something new other than
Well,
Sean?
Connecting for Kids, I think. should
Connecting
go
for
on the
Kids, okay.
Uh-huh.
I actually like bringing up Oregon because it's not focused on kids. And I continue to say, and you've heard me before, this is about all of us. And the kids are going to be adults.
Yeah.
And they're going to be parents again. And we need to talk about how this is not about a moment in time. It's about how we work for Oregon to make all of Oregon better.
Folks like bringing up Oregon, should we? Anybody
Yeah.
really opposed to bringing up Oregon?
More balance.
Sorry.
So, no, you're good.
Well, Shauna, bringing up Oregon to you says, we're going to try and raise your kids instead of the parents.
Yeah, I love the double entendre that we're also bringing up the subject of Oregon's kids and that, but I really worry about the more rural and frontier perspective that that's
Well, that's
about.
not just rural, that's everywhere. People worrying about the government overstepping into the role of parents.
But we aren't saying bringing up kids.
The other big component, yes, this is about kids, but it's really about parents and families, because without the parents and the families, we can't.
Right.
Children. So by just saying children, the kids, we're missing the real focus of the dual generation or.
Yeah. Well, that's why we
bringing up
like, the
families.
bringing up Oregon is sort of, yeah.
So I'm wondering, in some of the brainstorming that you go back and do in the bringing up Oregon piece, that you maybe tack into some of the pioneering pieces of the state. You know, because we're pretty sturdy people, strong people, and it's more of a family focus within 4 agencies. Just a thought.
Okay. All right, so we're not adopting a name today, correct? And we'll see what the polling shows, Alyssa, but.
It looks like bringing up Oregon had the most ones next to it, followed by All In for Kids, but bringing up Oregon by a lot had the most.
Hey,
Right in a vote.
So you can try to work off of that maybe.
okay.
Okay.
The next page says adoption.
Adoption, yeah. So if there's any questions,
Yeah.
I was gonna go through next steps after, but we can do it before if you'd rather.
Okay, let's have some discussion
Yes.
before we go to that slide.
Um,
Carrie.
I loved it, and I missed the retreat, but I really, when I read through it, I was really excited about it. There's just a couple places in it where there are acronyms used, where they're not explained first.
Sure.
And I think if this is going to be everybody's plan, we need to make sure that the acronyms are all explained the first time they're used, maybe many times that they're used.
Or
So that
glossary.
it's not so, there is a glossary in the back,
There's the
but
glossary.
but it's just, we want to be as unjargony as we can be, so that was just my,
Get to the glossary.
I had to look something up, and I'm immersed in the jargon, so.
Good point.
And we
Thanks,
have an
Carrie.
outside copy editor too.
Oh, good.
So, I'm sure they'll also catch things. They won't know what those acronyms mean either.
Right, thank you.
Other comments from council members?
Chair Miller. You said we did 14 months of this, and I will admit, it feels like we've been doing it for a long, long time. But I'm with Terry. I think it's a pretty good document. It shows an awful lot of work that everybody's done on the council, outside of the council, from state agencies. And I think that our internal staff on the ELD have done an amazing job figuring out what it is that we were headed towards. So I think kudos there, because I'd still be looking at 14 months ago trying to figure it out. So Miriam, your staff's done a really nice job putting this all together for us, along with Carrie out of Bill.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Martha. It's been a tremendous effort. And I would just say, in keeping with the pioneering spirit, this is, and Harriet talked about this as a retreat, this is a very unique plan because of truly the cross-sector focus. So I think we set out at the inception of this to try to put a plan together that really, I think, spoke to the charge of the council. This is our governance structure over a comprehensive early learning system in the state of Oregon, and we needed a plan to reflect that. I think this plan pushes the field forward in ways, and certainly it's most important for it to be the right plan for the state of Oregon and for our partners and our children and families, but it is very unique. So I think it's important to really recognize there were not a lot of templates for doing something like this. And so there's been a lot of innovating along the way, and tremendous. It wouldn't have been possible, I think, without Alyssa being able to almost, dedicate herself almost entirely to this process. David, Sarah, there was a larger team that started with initial translation of your themes to strategies and documents within the ELD, who put in a tremendous amount of work. And yes, the BUILD initiative and their TA and technical assistance was hugely helpful, and that wouldn't have been possible without our terrific funders, early childhood funders in the state of Oregon, who made that possible. So it's been a huge effort. And then the staff of our state agency partners and advisors sitting here around the table who have also put in a lot of work to get us to helping to, to bring forward their ideas and their opportunities. I think we are able to have a cross-sector plan because we have great partners in our other state agencies who have who think about early childhood in this agenda as well. So we wouldn't have been able to capture it without all their work, so.
Well, we're hearing from outside partners, the allies and the advocates, and they're all going, oh my God, we love it, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yep. So now it just needs a name worthy of, no pressure.
No pressure. Okay. Any other comments from council members? All right, I would entertain a motion to adopt this early learning system strategic plan. Eva moves it. And Holly seconds it. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Woo-hoo! We have a strategic plan.
Why there was a bottle
We have
opener
champagne.
over there earlier. I was like, what's the early learning division doing in this room?
I know, it's us doing it.
It's actually apple cider
It
too.
is apple cider.
For those who aren't here.
Damn. Now it works.
Doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think
Writing it all down.
I would certainly echo Martha's comments about staff. It's been an amazing staff effort. And Alyssa, I'm sure you and I have had more midnight emails than we care to count concerning the plan. So Alyssa just did an amazing job of coordinating all that public input, as well as drafting, redrafting, redrafting. This must be about version 45 on that. Yeah.
It's a great way to end this year and begin the new year.
Yeah, so cheers to everybody, staff, everyone who's worked on this. And now the easy part, moving forward and implementing it. Yeah, nothing to it. All right.
To echo Bobby's comment, I was at a hub meeting yesterday, and they were anticipating the plan and what they can be doing, and, encouraging each other to review it and see where they can see themselves as far as doing something. So it is already getting traction.
Well, when some of us were in a meeting earlier today with the governor, and I told her at that meeting, I said, well, my expectation is that the council's going to adopt this plan in about 3 hours. And someone said, oh, good luck.
I said, I'm not going to cause any problems.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Very exciting. Moving on to the
We
consent.
want to do the next steps.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
I've already implemented it.
It's done. This is just a quick, I know we said we'd have some things ready that weren't. And so we're working on getting a letter from the governor to include at the start of this plan. And then we're also working on an executive summary. And based on kind of the feedback we got from you, particularly about something that could really be left behind, we're looking at what housing did with sort of their placemat model, the visual on the front. So having the core data and the back, that graphic summary. And we're trying to balance out if it'll just be objectives or objectives and strategies. But we're trying to fast track and make sure we have that ready and pretty and designed for you all. And then in terms of committees, I know we started the conversation a little bit at the retreat, but just wanted to kind of reiterate the takeaway. So committees with existing work, measuring success with the dashboard, and then best beginnings, especially serving multiple roles, continuing to meet. I know Equity Implementation Committee and Child Care Education Committee, you're more dependent on what we do next with this plan. And so I think those two committees will probably be on hold for a couple of months. And we'll start reviewing the membership, the charters, especially after we talk with the Children's Cabinet about ensuring these new committees are all cross-sector. So we haven't quite figured out timing of I can't say that by, February committees will be back up and running or anything, but just didn't want to lose that thread, that sort of January's work as we'll start thinking about how we need to do this work via committees. And if chairs want help with messaging that to committees, I'm happy to draft something, just let me know. So those are the big next steps, and then we'll have a nice, pretty named final strategic plan for you in January.
Questions about the next steps from council members? I think that executive summary is going to be incredibly important.
Because even though it's sad, it's the only thing most people will read.
Right.
Exactly, Bobby.
Yeah.
And we all know that.
Yeah.
So certainly giving some thought, what's the takeaway from that?
Sure.
Are we going to focus on what's not happening in Oregon, which is usually where a lot of places go?
Right.
What's not working? And then where's the vision of what can this state look like? If we can implement this.
I think that message that we've been bouncing around the table all afternoon, that this is about what you can do, should come out loud and clear, that this is something that will happen only if we all work together. That seems like it should be in the executive summary. I mean, how many times have we already discussed it today?
I think the
Donalda?
executive summary can also be a hook. I mean, I've often read an executive summary that said, or, oh, wow. I
What's
wanna
inside?
Where is that? And I want to go find more. So it needs to be the kind that whets your appetite so that you want to find out more.
Send it out without the executive summary. Make them read it.
Well, and, we've talked in other meetings about how many audiences are we going to try to appeal to or address or interest, whatever. So,
The other thing is, so many, I was just listening as I drove up, even federal reports are now almost predominantly electronic, so you can do fancy things. And like, get to the part that interests you immediately, that kind of thing. That's not my strength, but it feels like if we could look at the plan, not so much as a paper document, but as an electronic document, because it opens up accessibility.
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And you could do some fun things with it. I mean, we're talking about kids and families, so there should be a lot of fun ways to present that.
Okay.
We'll get the health department to help with this, right, Pat?
Are any of these other plans that we are connecting with electronic? Or are they written? They paper or electronic?
They all provided links to them as well that we will include, so they're
there's
both paper
electronic
and
for all.
electronic, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, so we can make sure so we have a link in the intro, so people can always access it that way if they gave us a link.
Maybe it's like the Monopoly board. There's a hard place for housing, and
There you go.
there's each one of those.
We did toy with using, David suggested Monopoly, the little totems as the icons instead. Okay.
Any other next steps that we all want to throw out for staff to jump on?
Or other thoughts for the executive summary since
Yeah.
goal for next week?
I think we should mention too, we have talked to Representative Lively about the possibility of putting together a legislative breakfast. The start of session is sort of a launching off point to begin kind of dissemination of the plan and session. So we'll be sharing more details, I think, around that is that it's just in very initial kind of planning stages about what that looks like. And I know, and again, I think for all of us, thinking about, how we use it in session and how we're using it as a reference point for all of our work is going to be really important, as well as I have a opportunity to meet with hub directors next week, and Sue Miller is going to join as well. I think we'll also be getting their ideas about dissemination kind of in communities. So, in addition to, I think, the dissemination, the work, as Alyssa's lined out as we come back in the year, is really some of that prioritization, continuing to fill out that grid, thinking about how we're going to embed this, and some of the committee work, children's cabinet, our work is, some of what's ahead of us as we think about transitioning to implementation.
If we do have that breakfast, it would be nice if we could have a family, or, some of the, this is the focus, is children and families. Seems like it would be nice if we could have some representation from
I
families.
got a couple kids I'll drag along with.
Yeah.
But it's just,
Absolutely.
so it's not just state agencies.
I'm thrilled. My great niece is in a preschool promise program, and I am so excited to be able to live it and watch it. And I tell her mom, I was part of that, I did that. Or whatever. They don't know what I do. So. Oh, yeah. You can bring yours.
Good work. Well, certainly so speaking of implementation, what's the timeline? When are we going to start having a substantive conversation about that? Now that we've adopted it 10 minutes ago? What's the implementation plan? David?
We don't have one. We have to develop. Well, I think we talked, even just this week on our last call, in our conversation with Harriet Dichter, who, helped really stepped in this summer to help with the kind of writing process and who facilitated our retreat. Prioritization, we've tried some exercises with prioritization, and that has been challenging for us as a council, right? So I think that's part of what we really need to look to. I think the release of the governor's budget and her policy agenda and some of her budget priorities may be a good now helpful way to sort of sort and filter, and then to think about what are some of the things that we want to move this year. But I think that's where I really see is moving towards getting us a work plan, is we've got to think about what are some of those priorities and things that we're going to focus on in this next biennium, as well as the grid and completing the grid, which we still have some work to do to get input from the state agencies, to make sure that, whether you get assigned a triangle or a circle or a half moon or a star, a square, that we're all really, we've captured that kind of feedback, and we know what are the different
whether that's a early learning council committee, if it's if it's going in the children's cabinet work plan, if it's, something that a state agency partner is gonna be kind of convening a working group and leading and just reporting back to the council on. I think those are some of the details that will go into what is a work plan for us.
Right. I'm guessing our state agency partners will play a pretty huge role in that, knowing what their priorities are going to be within their own staffing. Obviously, David has found a lot of yellow.
Yeah.
So a lot of work's going to be going on that we'll need to be aware of and a part of, but certainly we won't be the driving force behind it.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, please do, Mr. Director.
Well, I was just going to say, if we've done our work right, and I really think we have, there's a good part of this plan that shouldn't require the council to do much directly at all for implementation, because it's already tied to something that I'm already driving that's important in my plan or in housing and community services plan or those kinds of things. So like I say, if we've done this right, it's a fair bit of it is self-activating.
Yes. And we have that on the record. Thank you, Pat. No, I think that's very true, and that's the point I was trying to make, especially when you look at all of this yellow. There's a lot here that is being done independently. Oh, yeah, this is one of two copies that exist in the universe right now, but you all will be getting them as soon as it's finalized. Yeah, but thank you, Martha.
I was looking for it.
Right, no, sorry, David just handed it to me after another meeting we had earlier, where you were.
Chair Miller, I do have one question. So it has committees with existing work will continue to meet, but we do know that we have to figure out a committee structure. And I think some of the process that we've talked about here today, as well as in other places, is 6 months down the road, and I get a little nervous at 6 months. So if there are things that can be pulled out readily, easily and quickly, that we know that we can do now, let's figure out how to start that process. Because I personally, I don't want to wait.
Yeah, no, I think, my ideal timeline would be about that, just reasonably, if the council's only meeting for 2 hours every month, alternating in person and virtual, thinking of what you can accomplish at these tables in those discussions. I'm trying to just not overpromise. But I think, yeah, we don't necessarily want to wait 6 months for work to begin. So I think, as to Pat's point and to what Miriam was saying, some of this work has been happening and is happening. So I think we need to kind of quantify what that is and where we're already heading in that direction with a committee. So where we can kind of capitalize on that existing work. We've visually depicted that in the plan. Now we need to actually see what that means. So I think that there will be work that can happen sooner than later. I think that the bigger structure discussion, particularly about how we make all committees cross-sector, where council plays a role and what that role looks like, that's the part that might take longer. But I think work will be happening even if we haven't quite settled what the overall structure looks like and what membership looks like on those committees. That's, from my perspective, where we stand right now.
Right, and we have several committees, and I would hate for people to be on committees and think, well, they're not meeting, and then lose interest and go away and have to reboot and restart. I mean, let's not lose momentum in some of those areas.
Absolutely. I don't know, chairs, if you want to add anything, other committee chairs. And we can work on communication too. I'll work with all the chairs, particularly for the ones who aren't convening as frequently, to make sure we're being really transparent about the process and the work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good discussion. Anything else on next steps?
That's it for me.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah.
Move then to the consent agenda. Two of our committees met since our last meeting, Best Beginnings and Measuring Success. The notes are under tab 3. Any comments from the chairs? Martha?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Miller. First of all, on committee membership, there is a mistake. Jessica Britt is no longer on the committee. She had young children. She decided to leave her position, and she is raising children. But Marguerite Carnegie is missing from the list, and she should be on. She's not off. I have a couple of comments. We did have a presentation at our last meeting on universal home visiting, and Kate Wilcox brought her folks in from Oregon Health Authority to give that update and get our Best Beginnings Committee up to speed on what the thought process was, what the potential policy option was going to be, or I'm sorry, legislative concept, as well as some other information on that. I think it was a very robust conversation. I think they were fairly well engaged. Donalda was on the phone. So I want to, when we talk the spirit of cross-sector, I really want to thank Kate for bringing everybody in for that conversation, because there were a lot of questions around, well, what is it? Why are we doing it? Why are we having this program versus another program? And the overview was pretty good for the Best Beginnings Committee. And then under Erin's piece on Healthy Families Oregon, I do have a couple of comments. She several months ago, almost a year ago, started reaching out to Coffee Creek to see if she could get healthy families into Coffee Creek. And she's almost there. She's a real go-getter. But her two people are trained to go in. I would say a little bit of frustration is that Coffee Creek isn't as responsive back. They said, oh yeah, give us brochures, we'll put them out. And she goes, no, that's not how it works. So she's working with them, and I expect by probably February, March at the latest, she will have a first mom in Coffee Creek and then start to build that Healthy Families home visiting program within Coffee Creek.
Awesome. Very exciting.
And
So
then
which local program is
be Washington County.
County?
Coffee Creek's in Washington County.
They have a head start.
So we've, we, meaning the state agency, she's determined that that's probably the best one. They agreed that they wanted to do it. And so they have 2 home visitors that are trained. They've passed the background checks for Coffee Creek. They've gone through all of everything they have to do in order to come and go.
Great.
And then something that is not in her little write-up that we just found out about a few days ago. We had John Valley out of the State Treasurer's Office in to give a presentation on Baby Grad and the funding program that they have for saving for college. And one of those is the Baby Grad. And for every parent who enrolls their child in Baby Grad with $25, the state will match $25. And she took that idea and she ran, talked to John over at the Treasurer's Office and got the approval that they have a pilot program that they're putting together to start. They're going to pilot it for 6 to 12 months. And for every completed home visit that an HFO family has, who's given the $25, they will get an additional $5 so that their graduation account will grow. What we know is that kids, especially low-income kids who have any kind of a savings plan, even if it's $500, are more likely to go on to post-secondary education. So we feel that as she can track this, this will show completion rate in home visiting program. It will have kids probably more ready, hopefully, for kindergarten and more likely to graduate, as well as more likely to go on to post-secondary. So we're in kind of a little project here for 18 years, I think. So Aaron took that and ran. So I want to put kudos out to that.
Thank you, Martha. Exciting update. Measuring success, Holly.
Yes, so we had a meeting last month and came together. It's been an exciting time, I think, for measuring success because we've been doing the dashboard work, as you all know, sort of alongside the strategic planning work. And this was one of the first opportunities we had to really look at how does the work around the dashboard align with the work of the strategic plan. And had a really great discussion. I think the last time we presented to you all, we had the long-term outcomes that we were ready to share. And those really are they're meant to reflect those shared system goals. So they tie to each of the big system goals. As we get into the intermediary outcomes, there's been a little more question about, are these tied more to processes? Are they tied to the strategic plan specifically? And dug into that at this meeting. And I think came to a really great result of agreeing that the intermediary measures in the dashboard really align or should align with the objectives in the strategic plan, not getting down to the strategy level because those will likely be more output focused as we move forward and sort of part of the work plan, but have this new vision around how we can better connect the intermediary measures we've been talking about with the objectives in the strategic plan. And so we have some work ahead of us to compare the work we've done and make sure that they match up to the objectives and there's nothing that should be tweaked or added. So we'll be doing that over the next couple of meetings, I would imagine. I don't know, David or Bobby, if there's anything that you'd like to add.
Well, this theme of being cross-sector and responsible, it seems an important part of our work is what are the agencies tracking? So as we choose, it's not ELD is totally responsible for the dashboard. It's a shared, and so, for instance, can there be, the dashboard be filled with a lot of links to data points that that the other partners are responsible for? So there's that, it's kind of this carrying out the system view through into the dashboard and getting buy-in that they're going to keep something current and we can link to it.
Really, all the sectors should see themselves in those long-term overarching goals, that they have something to contribute. And then with the intermediary measures, they'll be smaller and more discrete, and they could be sector-specific or in some cases maybe even program-specific, but each sector should see themselves in the dashboard and certainly in the intermediary outcomes. And as Bobby said, should be able to be keeping that data up to date. That'll be the next big discussion around what does that look like? So, yeah.
Thank you, Holly and Bobby and David, who does a little bit of work in this arena. Okay. Miriam, you want to give us your quick report?
Absolutely. So in tab 4, you have a written pager from updates. So first so I'll kind of walk you through this. First is the preschool development grant, birth to 5. So we've talked about this in the past. I won't spend a lot of time on it. I think what would probably be best is to share the application with all of you. So you have enjoyed some holiday reading. But it is, as you'll see, as we talked about, with just how much
Is there an
we've.
executive summary?
Not yet. I had hoped to have an executive summary, which we have not been able to put together yet. So you can have the full meal deal, the application. I think you'll enjoy reading it because, again, it's another really example of how we've leveraged the strategic planning process and all of this work, because a lot of what went into putting that application together was
was thinking about what do we have the opportunity to do next year with one-time resources that really is aligned to work we know that we want to do relative to the strategic plan, and how do these resources help accelerate and allow us to drive some of that work. That was, as I mentioned before, kind of challenging in so much as we had to make that fit with what scored more points and what were the priorities. As you guys know, is always the sort of dance with you do with grants. But so we're hopeful. We think we should hear around December 15th if we got it or not, or sort of at least by the end of the calendar year. Just what we understand is the federal timeline for having to disperse the funds. So be on the lookout for that email, and we will send the full application to you. I also wanted, so you can read it. The second thing I wanted to update on was organizational structure changes at the Early Learning Division. So as you know, I try to update you on kind of our important sort of recruitments or new positions that we have at the ELD. We are continuing to make progress on an organizational capacity plan. We won't really be able to make progress. There's a lot of yellow here that is the ELD. And so, we need, in order to be able to drive the kind of changes in our system and services and for children and families, we need a strong division, as we know, and we also need a very strong hub system. And so that's really, I think, the spirit of the work we continue to do within ELD is how are we building our own capacity internally so that we can continue to do more. So along those lines, one of the changes that we made, I'm going to talk about sort of one new staff person that's joined, as well as two sort of shifts in responsibilities. The new staff member is Ann Morrison, and I think she is here. There she is. Hi, Ann. Ann is a policy analyst, and she comes from the San Francisco Office of Early Care and Education, where she was a senior data and evaluation analyst. One of the things we were really excited to learn about Ann's background and experience is that she helped design and launch a coordinated eligibility system for the city's child care assistance programs. So we are just thrilled to have Ann. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, or yourself? Okay. How many weeks is it now?
4 weeks.
4 weeks, yes. And so that Ann is somebody that you will also get to work really closely with, because one of her responsibilities in her portfolio is going to be rulemaking for the Early Learning Council. So all are going to get to know Ann, and Ann is going to get to know you. Really, she's already really kind of just jumped in with helping support the work around the child care rule revisions. And so we're really excited to have Ann. I'm also really excited to announce that Nikisha Knight-Coyle is taking on a new role and responsibility at the ELD. She is our Director of Program Administration. So this is a new team at the ELD where we are basically bringing together our information and data systems operations team, as well as our staff across the division that focus on grants management. So we are really trying to centralize grants management functions within ELD, as well as add more capacity in that area. That's without going into too much detail, I'll say that I think this is a really important change for the way we do work with our partners. So we do, I think, a really great job of being able to think about, share one grant or contracts, but we know some of our partners receive multiple, are funded out of multiple programs and funding streams across the division. And for them, that really feels like they have 4 or 5 different grants managers, right? I think the other thing that we do is we're very lean, I think, on program staff and grants management staff, and we end up hiring a lot of terrific content experts and people that really know program and know their area. Erin Dean, I think, is a great example. And then they end up spending a lot of time on grants management.
and less around support and implementation. And you think that cuts across, I use Erin as an example, but that cuts across the program. So I'm really excited that we'll be able, through centralization, I think we'll be able to build portfolios that really make sense for our partners, and expand more and hire more, really, I think, for that skill set that will also do the work. The other thing that we're really aiming at with this organizational capacity plan is make sure that we're really able to support more cross-unit, cross-functional work. So it's not that we're trying to silo that team, it's that team will be focused on that work, but they'll still work really closely with program team. So the other sort of shift is Gwen Bachtel, who will be the early learning, is the new early learning programs manager. So again, this is a new role. And within this role, she'll be really continue to work really closely with Nikisha and her new team. And this is an area where we're also adding capacity. So we'll have the new baby promise specialist who will be helping us really develop that pilot and launch that pilot in that team, as well as bringing our OPK program specialists together along with our preschool promise, sort of under Gwen's leadership. So I really appreciate Nikisha and Gwen taking on these new roles and changes. And again, this is another team that we hope, if there is an opportunity, as the governor would like, to expand access to preschool and to do more in services. I think both of these changes are going to be, internally are going to be really helpful as we grow and we grow our staff to be able to implement this exciting agenda.
So Miriam, a question with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the responsibilities that Nikisha and Gwen have had, where will those go?
Yeah, that's my question too. Is there somebody behind them, or is they do the work they've been doing plus this?
So it's a shift in work and it's consolidating. So right now what we had, as I said, was sort of program team doing a couple grants management staff. And then we had, so Nikisha oversaw preschool promise, HFO in one unit. So what we've done is we've added capacity because Gwen now is able to do that. And then Nikisha is taking on more of the grant specialist functions and that. So it's not that their jobs are, we've looked at their functions and split them between the two different directors,
But we haven't added staff behind them.
No, not yet.
It's more a
Oh, well,
shifting.
Gwen's position, we did add another
We did.
staff person, yes. So we are going to be bringing on a new preschool promise manager, yeah. What's that?
That's good.
Yes, I understand, yes. No, we're, I thought you meant it in terms of their two functions, but yeah, we are backfilling for Gwen's position.
Miriam, I'm going to suggest that we come back to the rest of your report and break, since Pooja is here.
Absolutely.
And talk about.
Yep, and this is, again, I think these are just informational, so you have it here in writing, and if there's questions, I don't think I need to go through it again, but
Okay,
yeah.
people may have questions about how to key into some of those meetings. Okay, all right. So council, let's jump to the governor's recommended budget, quite an exciting part of our agenda. I think most of you have probably met Pooja by now. She's the governor's education policy advisor. So she and Miriam work closely together, and we're excited to have you here today talking about the governor's budget. And I know this isn't the first meeting you've had talking about this budget. So welcome, Pooja.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon, and I would be remiss if I didn't first congratulate you on adopting the strategic plan, and thank you for your tremendous work on it for the past year plus. I know that it's going to be really transformational in combination with the investments that the governor is hoping to see, and I'm sure that you are as well. So I wanted to start off by just providing an overview of the governor's budget related to early care and education, which she released on Wednesday. And say that the governor's investment plan for education has really been informed by her children's cabinet, which Sue and Miriam were both leaders in. And we know that that work and their leadership was also informed by your work as the Early Learning Council and the strategic plan. So what you'll see is hopefully a tremendous amount of alignment between your new strategic plan and the governor's investment plan for education, for early care and education. So just for a piece of context, the overall state budget for this biennium is facing a $630 million shortfall. So the governor had to make some really tough decisions about what to prioritize and what to deprioritize, knowing that there's so many services that Oregonians rely upon. Given that, she did not cut the early learning division budget at all, and in fact added to her balanced budget about $22 million worth of investments combined between Baby Promise in addition to the 10.7 that's federal funds. She added 1.5 for staffing in the early learning division to ensure quality child care, and $10.5 million for supports for early childhood professionals. So that is all within her balanced budget, $22 million, even given the $630 million shortfall. Now, the governor is of the opinion that the education system from cradle to career should be a seamless system, and we have historically underfunded our education and early learning system for decades. And in order to make up for that, to get the outcomes that Oregonians deserve, we need a massive investment in education, including early learning. So her investment plan that she announced on Wednesday, beyond her balanced budget, because she statutorily has to provide a balanced budget, she says that's not good enough for Oregon. We need an investment plan. So she has proposed a $2 billion plan that includes a number of things in early care and education that I'll talk about, an additional $900 million for K-12, and nearly $600 million for higher education, because she believes that an investment plan really should be focused on the entire spectrum of cradle to college and career. So with that said, I just want to talk a little bit about the specific investments that some of you may already be familiar with, and you have a handout here that we'll make sure is available on the web as well. So for childcare supply and quality, you know this very well about the crisis we're facing in this state. The governor is very well aware as well. And that's why she's proposed $10 million for Baby Promise, as I mentioned, to really enhance the quality and affordable infant and toddler care. I mentioned the $1.5 million for early learning division staffing. Preschool and kindergarten readiness strategies, she's proposing to take the 1,300 slots that currently exist and add over 6,000 more to the preschool promise slots with an almost $170 million investment. The way that she's thinking about preschool is that there's about 30,000 low-income children in the state who don't have any access to preschool. We know that preschool, high-quality preschool, is a driver of many myriad outcomes for students, for children. So that's why she's making this really significant investment in Preschool Promise, but she knows that a full-day program is not going to work for every family in the state. So she believes that Oregonians should have options. And among those options is having culturally specific and culturally responsive early childhood services available to families with young children. So she's proposed $15 million for the equity fund, knowing that it's not appropriate for any child to be tracked in equity fund related programs or Preschool Promise. Families should have access to both programs. In addition to those investments in Preschool Promise and Equity Fund, she's aware of the issues around Oregon pre-kindergarten and the wages that the educators in the Oregon pre-kindergarten system have, and the retention issues around that. She's proposing $101.3 million to increase pay parity for educators in the OPK system, to convert about a third of those slots, to provide transportation services to those families, and to increase the program from half-day to full-day to make the program work better for families in OPK, in addition to adding almost 1,000 early Head Start slots. Finally, in that section, she's knows that it's been great that the CCOs have worked to increase their developmental screens, but we haven't done a good job as a state of keeping up with the services for all those kids who are now being identified for services. So she's proposing over $45 million to increase access for, increase the adequate service level for children in the EIECSE system, knowing that that is a down payment. All of this is just a down payment. We're short of really providing what we need to for families and young children throughout the state, but a $380 million investment is hopefully what you think will a really good start to get us on a path for what we need to provide as a state. Workforce quality is absolutely critical if we're going to make these massive investments in improving access to quality childcare and preschool and kindergarten readiness strategies. We need the workforce to be able to do that. So she's proposing, under the Educator Advancement Council work, is $7 million for scholarships for educators who are wanting to improve their improve is the wrong word, is to take the next step on their higher education for those who wish to do that, as well as $3.5 million to create regional demonstration sites to share best practices. And then an additional 18.3 to enhance the supports that get providers the ability to enhance their quality rating on Spark. And then finally, an additional $5 million for relief nurseries, $2 million for healthy families, and $2 million more for parenting education. Now, David Mandel, he put this in my hand, and I was just really, I really appreciated the visual, because this is the strategic plan, and what's highlighted in yellow is everything that has been funded in the governor's down payment on early childhood. So you can see that there's a lot of yellow here, and that's a great start to getting what our families and children need in this state. So that was a very quick overview. I've talked a lot today, and I don't know if there's any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer anything if you have any questions.
Terry.
So this looks very education focused. So looking at cross-sector is Family Connects through the Oregon Health Authority, which is a community-based family and parenting support funded in the governor's budget.
It is at the $4 million. It appears in the budget as 8.7, I think, but that includes the federal
Match.
portion. Yeah.
Yes, the Children's Cabinet that the governor convened came up with a whole host of recommendations that are even beyond the early care and education pieces, so I haven't gone over all of that. There is available on the web this document that's called
They have it in there.
Oh, you have it. Okay, great. So on page 25, it begins the discussion of her vision around addressing the root causes of poverty and goes on after that. So, but yes, Kate is correct that Healthy Connects is part of that proposal as well. Now, some of you may be wondering, this sounds like a really great, ambitious plan. What's the plan to pay for it? The governor's was very interested in sharing a vision of what we can bring people together on. When we're talking with the legislature, it's really important for the governor to talk in partnership, both with stakeholders and with the legislature about, okay, we have a plan, we know what's important to families and Oregonians throughout the state. The next step is the how. And that's what she's interested in doing before session and during session. And she wants your support, the support of people who really care about education and economic outcomes for Oregonians, to be working in tandem to share with the legislature why these investments are really critical, so that they can understand the needs to help find the money for that.
Yeah, Pooja, earlier in our meeting, we talked a little bit about the cabinet meeting on Monday, and the fact that at that meeting, there was quite a bit of conversation about how are we going to educate and inform the public about this plan, and how all of us are invested in this. And actually, and the cabinet talked also about how do we get it down to the community level, and then the individual levels. So all of us start taking responsibility for the welfare of our children.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're very interested, and hopefully we'll be working with some of the governor's communications staff to also figure out the messaging of this, that children do provide the foundation for all of us.
Right.
So we better start acting as if they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to have to work in close partnership as we go forward through session. Yeah.
Right, right. Any questions of Pooja about the governor's budget as well as education investment proposal? Which is exciting, ambitious, good vision to have out there. Exciting vision.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Pooja, and thanks for your work on this. We look forward to working with you to make it happen.
Absolutely. I plan to come to the Early Learning Council meetings more regularly, and we'll want to have a coalition of folks working together on this agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. And thanks for joining us today, Pooja. So Council, let's go back to Miriam's report. I really didn't want to short circuit the report. I think these staffing changes, Miriam, are critical. We talk a lot in our council meetings about capacity at the division to get the work done. And I think
Yes.
that's exactly what you are in the process of addressing.
Yep, absolutely. So I've just to continue, I'm highlighting a couple of positions for you that we're actively kind of recruiting for or looking to hire and fill. One is a deputy director for the early learning division. So we had a position posted. That position is closed. We're in the process of going through the applications that we received. The deputy will oversee kind of the programs teams and operations. So that would be the new community systems team, which is as well as the programs team and the role that Gwen has stepped into, as well as the program administration and Akeisha's new role. I will continue to have sort of primary responsibility as we think about a deputy and the early learning system director position for sort of the policy, research, communications, as well as the Office of Child Care. So that's a bit about the structure. For the deputy, the community systems director, which I think I've mentioned previously, that position has also closed as well. We're going through a process of interviewing candidates from that position. And that is going to unify kind of in one team, the early learning hub staff, our VROOM parenting education coordinator, as well as our quality improvement and professional development team. And under kind of one unit. I think this gives us great opportunity, again, to build a team that is really focused around kind of supporting implementation in communities. And when I think about our R&Rs and our hubs, they're both regional structures and systems, and I think it will allow us to also kind of better align and kind of unify their work together. You know, in the last session, there was an effort to create greater alignment between the geographic areas between CCR&Rs and hubs. And so I think that will help us sort of do this more internally, kind of under one team. And then we are also, we had posted for a communications director position. This position, we're also in the process of interviewing for, they will take on the responsibilities of sort of the public information officer for the early learning division as a whole, as well as be our primary contact and spokesperson for the division's work internally. Are there any questions before I jump ahead to e-board, because I think that's also relevant to positions for the Office of Child Care?
So where is data structures, so in your staff? I mean, is it in another part and not in any of these new pieces, but data systems, managing the new Ellis and
Yeah, that is,
collecting
that team is under
data.
Nikisha.
That,
Yes.
okay, all of that. And then does Tom go under Nikisha too, or is he
Tom
separate?
is on the policy team.
Got it.
So he's more research, that's more information.
Research
data
and
systems.
the data systems will be under Nikisha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I wonder if you give us a
Org chart.
org
Yeah.
chart. Thank you. I was thinking, yeah.
An org chart.
I can definitely do that, yep.
And your timing on these?
Had more of our site, or to host all this hard work to get the system supporting all of this plan to be more aligned. It's very exciting, all the work that you have done in the division to really get things where they need to be to increase capacity as best you can with the resources. It's taken a lot of creativity.
Legal.
Okay, this may not be a politically appropriate question, but would the new budget give us the staffing to do the work? I mean, I saw,
That's a great question, Bob.
but it didn't feel like enough to me. It felt like it was backing up licensing, which is critical, but not dealing with some of the other parts of the division that are also so badly understaffed.
Yeah, it's very lean. So I think the organizational capacity plan to this point is really trying to maximize, I think, kind of the expertise that we have and get people kind of into the right roles and form the right teams, so we can do the work. And then through some of the creativity, we've been able to look at where do we add some critical capacity, where we're lacking. So those have been, I think, kind of and I'll share the org chart with you, that kind of where it gets us to date. I'm hoping that it also positions us for more capacity, particularly with more resources, because, we don't have the capacity right now existing to really implement, a $380 million agenda, right, if we were to be so fortunate. So what we did as well is we built additional capacity and positions within those existing investments. So we're still in the process, of looking at actually what was funded and what the positions look like within that, but that's exactly sort of what our approach was to say, if we assume a more robust preschool investment, what are investments that we need to make, for example, in the hub system, in the CCR&R system, and at the ELD, to be able to both, to move that agenda, to support quality implementation.
So embedded in some of these other items.
Yep.
Is capacity to actually administer them.
Yes, but we're still, I think my caveat is we're still trying to get that kind of additional detail. So I think in the next couple of weeks or so, we'll understand, what was actually, we know kind of amounts at this point, but what was funded. So I don't want to speak without fully having been able to do that analysis. But yeah, I think in all of our conversations with the governor, we've been clear that capacity both at the state level and at the local level, and infrastructure would be needed to be able to get more services to children and families. As far as licensing and the Office of Child Care, we also have, as you know, because of the opportunity of the additional discretionary funds through CCDF, we are continuing this sort of approach and phasing in and adding more positions that look at caseloads and more capacity within licensing and OCC. So when Pooja talks about the 1.5 million, that's making of the 14 positions that we got in the short session, 5 of those were limited duration positions, and those were general fund, right? So those would be now made permanent. So that's that piece, but that is not at all reflective of the total, I think, position, authority, and sort of positions that we think are embedded and are represented in the budget when you consider the federal funds that the legislature will be incorporating as part of the legislatively adopted budget.
And then maybe you're going to talk about it later, but going to the e-board, are we confident that we're going to get authority for all of the CCDF in time to spend it?
Yes. I think we're in a really good place. We've been doing a lot of work between the September e-board and leading up to the December e-board in terms of our conversation, our engagement with the Legislative Fiscal Office. So I feel really good about most of the positions that we're requesting in December, which would sort of complete this phase. But again, there are more positions to address caseloads that will be considered in session. We hope kind of at the start of session. We're still negotiating some of those details. And then on the DHS side, I think similarly, bargaining has been going well. I don't know, Eva, if you want to share more about that. And I think we're also in a really great spot in terms of being able to implement the reimbursement rate increases. Anything you want to say about?
I heard lots of compliments from Annalise to give to you and your staff and the DHS too for being able to be so nimble to go into bargaining so quickly out of, not the normal time frame. And then also being able to come in and have, just do good work in a quick way. So, thank you.
So that all looks really good, yeah.
So Miriam, on the reimbursement rates and the rest of the CCDF money that's kind of set aside, waiting for December, and I know a majority of that is on the DHS side, but it runs through ELD. Do we have a sense of whether that money's going to all be spent the way that it was recommended? Is the best terminology that I can use.
Yes. I mean, I think bargaining is a very important milestone and an important step in being able to implement the spending plans, so.
Thank you, Eva.
I don't know if Kim is still on, if she wants to say anything about DHS and e-board, but we are, once again, like we did in September, we submitted a joint letter that really talked about the ELD, the portion of the funds and the spending plans that would stay at ELD, and those would be transferred to ERDC, so we did that again.
Kim,
I think this is Kim. So I think in relationship to the question about are we going to be able to spend the money, I think where we continue to struggle is if families cannot find providers to get into childcare, then they're not using the ERDC funds. And so I believe that the strategy and the research is saying that if we raise the rates, there'll be more providers there. And so we should see an increase of utilization overall by this spending. So I'm certainly hopeful that that's what we see because, we hear every single day what a challenge it is for families to find a provider for the child care needs that they're having. So.
Yes. Yeah, I think, right, Kim, that is a universal statewide problem.
I think that's why a lot of the advocates at the table were also really eager to do something about the co-pays, which that wasn't possible at this point. Because that would get to supply and parent ability to pay too. I know that increasing the rates. I just saw the letter of agreement or the signed off on rates yesterday. So I said, "Are you guys excited?" And I got a yes. And there's still a significant difference between now that we only have two rates. Or two rate areas, not two rates, but two rate areas. There's still that significant difference between rate area A and rate area B. Which some providers understand and some still are kind of like, how are we still going to do the work necessary when we're getting so much less to care for an infant or toddler than rate area A. So, I mean, there's still work to be done. It's like, it's definitely a big step, and so people are not discouraged. I think it's more of a, they were more hopeful, but yeah, they're hopeful that we'll continue, and they know we're going to continue the work, so.
So even you were able to negotiate Area C away, or what happened to Area C?
It got rolled up into B.
Okay, like we thought. Okay.
I think it's important that it's not every family has trouble finding care, so that we focus our efforts where it's parents of infants and toddlers, it's parents with non-traditional schedules. If I have a healthy 3 to 5-year-old, I'm probably, or school ager, I'm probably not having trouble. But there's some parents, so it just, as we think into the future, it's targeting.
But the rural areas are still difficult, especially infants and toddlers.
Yeah, infants and toddlers everywhere in the state.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's really important that we understand the challenges so that we target our efforts in a way that are going to make a difference.
So Kim, that raises a question for me. Are you tracking at DHS what the barriers are to the families you work with as far as finding childcare?
There's not a data source of tracking why people are having trouble finding childcare, so it's not as cut and dried as being able to pull a report. Certainly, I agree with what Bobby was saying, that a lot of families that work alternate hours or weekends or evenings, that's a really big challenge. I would just say that what we hear, especially in the rural areas, is that there just is not enough availability. And that really crosses the gamut of all ages of childcare need. So I feel like that it is difficult at this point to strategize on focused areas of people when we're hearing it so broadly.
Okay, and maybe that's something we all can work on together as partners in trying to gather more information and be more informed about where the gaps are. Yeah, Martha.
Yeah, I'm curious if 211 does any kind of data gathering when they're doing referrals. You know, how many of those folks that actually get into a provider, or the families are calling back because they weren't able to get into a provider.
I'm just going to say, I don't think it would be reliable data. We've gone from CCR&R giving referrals in our community to people getting referrals off Facebook. I'm very disappointed with the transition.
To 211?
Yes.
Yeah. It's, I mean, just whenever I've talked to people about, just friends coming to me, asking me, like, where can I find a childcare provider? And I say, I can't make any recommendations. Here are some people I know, or here's a way that you can get information on how to find somebody. And I suggest 211, and they're like, oh, please. I've gone there. It's not,
It's not helpful.
Yeah, we've done some work around that over the year to sort of staff at ELD to listen to communities around how the changes have been going. So I think some of the opportunities that we have reflected in the request that we made as a division in the governor's budget are to really look at how we leverage hubs and CCR&Rs to be able to do, to work together around more coordinated enrollment, which would have a portion of that really being, I think, more of that, more community driven, kind of
outreach shared around, you know, it's sort of more tailored, and then it will look at where we build some capacity within the CCR&R system to really help, you know, do more of that kind of local connection point. So I think between hubs and CCR&Rs, we're looking at resources for communities to be able to help families know about care, in particularly our early care and education programs that are publicly funded, that we know we want to be able to connect families to, as well as I think kind of build again that awareness around the bigger group of providers, even if they're not receiving any kind of public funding, that exist in the community, and help families who need more support connect to those services. So I don't think it's we also heard, and this is something we could put on a future agenda for the council if we want to talk a little bit more about and get a deeper update. But, you know, we heard, I think through the listening tour, that there are some advantages to having kind of the 211 services sort of being centralized in a connection point, but that there are some things that, some also capacity that needs to remain locally for that. And so I think it's sort of a both, and kind of switching from one to the other. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, Martha?
Chair Miller, Miriam, what I would be really interested in is that once the e-board does finish up with the CCDF funds, that we get a list or a grid of where all those funds are going. I was under the impression we had some alternate care that we were asking for our reimbursement, as well as a little more infant toddler, and that we were looking at some rural pieces. So is that possible that once e-board does that, that we can say, here's where all the funds have been allocated finally? Because we've kind of done this in two pieces.
Yep, absolutely. We can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of Miriam on her report, staffing changes, e-board, December 14th? Oh. Okay, anything else to come before the council? Council member wants to talk about? Well, congratulations, Madam Director, on a very exciting agenda. And that is a great way to wrap up this year and kick off the next one.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
We
See you
stand
guys in-
adjourned.
Hopefully before the new year.
Yes, probably so. And thank you, Pat and Kim, for being on the phone.
Pat left it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Whew.